Hello and welcome to the Last Word on Spurs. We are your award-winning Tottenham Hotspur podcast and we are back. Unfortunately, I have to tell you, Tottenham Hotspur are returning back to our lives ever so soon. Don't look so scared. Don't look so worried. Don't look also too terrified. There's a London derby to come. We'll get into all that. If you're with us for the first time, you can find us on iTunes, we're on Spotify, we're across all major audio platforms. We're of course on X, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook too, and we're joined and returning by three fabulous guests to Last Word on Spurs. I'm joined by a well-respected journalist, Paul Newman. He's back on the show. Paul, loves you back on. How are you?
Good evening, Ricky. It's great to be here. Thanks very much for having me back. I'm good. The stress has only just started building up to the weekend. I've had a very calm week or so, but now we're only a couple of days away, so we're starting to remember there's a game around the corner. But I'm good, thank you, and thanks for having me back.
My pleasure. Jason will be reminding you, Paul, about the cricket. A bloody collapse. I can't get him off the cricket. If it's not the football, it's the cricket. What can I say?
Well, the first test was amazing, wasn't it, Jason? If you're watching, which I'm sure you are, but the second one they had a bit of a dip tonight. But I still fancy them to win it because I've got great faith in them. But we'll see how the next couple of days go.
Oh, man, listen, totally agree. Back also on the show. Look, he only made his debut recently, and we've got him back for more. Simon Yemane's back in the house. Simon, thank you so much. How are you? Love to be back alongside us here.
I'm so pleased to be back. I'm so relaxed. 10 days without Spurs, something like that. My skin has cleared. My voice has gotten deeper. I got the sun. You see, I got a lot browner these last couple of days. I got a tan. So, yeah, I'm ready to get back into it.
You look so happy, Simon. You know, it's funny how happy we look.
I've been watching movies. I've been hanging out with my family. I've been touching grass, as they say.
Family? What are they? We don't have them involved in Tottenham weeks, do we? God, oh yeah, those. I remember those families. Yeah, brilliant.
They avoid me usually, but I've been allowed around them this time.
It's because we're happy for the last week. Simon, thank you so much. And look, he's an old hand at these now. Regular returning guest to the show. One of our own. George Achillea is back in the house. George, bless him. George, have you been enjoying the last week off? Happy?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a bit of a roller coaster. I think we had a very good period enjoying going to the games, and then the Brighton sort of ended it on a bit of a downer. But yeah, am I looking forward to going? Yeah. Spurs is back. Come on, we're looking forward to this. And always a pleasure to be back on here. So yeah.
Bless you, my man. Pleasure to have you on here. Look, obviously Spurs are back in action where Ange Postecoglou side will be looking to return to winning ways after that defeat to Brighton, which we don't want to go back into. It does feel quite a while ago now. And of course, a point where Spurs had before that game 5 successive wins. They were building some momentum after a mixed start to the season. And of course, no game next, I think, for Tottenham, that could be the perfect way to get the season back on track against West Ham United. A London derby. We'll come on to Ange's record in London derbies, the big ones, because they haven't been fairly good under him. And it's a West Ham side that had gone 5 games without a win before that trip to obviously Ipswich. They won by 4-1. So look, I've got to be honest with you. It'll be an interesting two sides meeting that really for different reasons will want to really get their seasons firmly back on track. But before we do, friend of the show, John from the White Rose, very kindly provided an international roundup of where we are with all of our players across the last week or so. So we're going to bring you on that very, very quickly of what happened to Spurs during the internationals and where everybody stood. Now, Guillermo Macario played 90 minutes in Italy's 4-1 win against Israel, although the game did see him concede off a direct corner. Many maybe would say it was a foul, but nevertheless, again, doesn't do great for Macario's confidence from corners, and he was an unused sub in Italy's 2-2 draw with Belgium. Pedro Porro created twice as many chances as the entire Serbia side combined, and also played 90 minutes in Spain's 1-0 win against Denmark. Christian Romero played 90 minutes in Argentina's 6-0 win against Bolivia, as did Mickey van der Ven, completing 90 minutes in the Netherlands' 1-0 defeat to Germany. Radu Dragusin played 90 minutes in Romania's 2-1 win against Lithuania and played 82 minutes in the 3-0 win against Cyprus, along with scoring. Luka Viskovic, this guy cannot stop scoring. He's now contributed to 5 goals in his last 6 games for both club and country, and once again completed a full 90 to help his country to a clean sheet. And occasionally reminding, 17-year-old centre-back, phenomenal, you've got to say, and a real star in the making that we'll hopefully see more of during the next pre-season. Destiny Udogie got 1 assist and completed 16 minutes in Italy's 4-1 win against Israel and played a further 20 minutes in Italy's 2-2 draw vs Belgium. Ben Davies played 90 minutes for Wales in their 1-0 win against Montenegro, helping his side keep a clean sheet. Archie Gray played 90 minutes in the England under-21's 7-0 win against Azerbaijan, and then played over an hour in their most recent game as well. Yves Basuva, he also played 90 in Mali's 0-0 draw against Guinea-Bissau and played a further 89 in Mali's international game after that. Pat Matassar, he played 90 and got a named man the match in Senegal's 1-0 win against Malor. Dejan Kulusevski got an assist and played 90 in Sweden's 3-0 win against Estonia before also playing a further 90 in Sweden's previous game before that. Mikey Moore played twice for the under-19s whilst bagging a goal on international duty. Dane Scarlett got 1 goal, 1 assist and played 30 minutes for England's under-21s against Azerbaijan. And Brennan Johnson, who cannot stop scoring, made it 7 goals in 7 for Wales, although he was suspended for Wales' game after that against Montenegro. And finally, Dominic Solanke played 18 minutes for England in their 2-2 loss versus Greece. He was an unused sub in the other game against Finland. The only player at the moment we understand who may be a concern to Spurs is that of Lucas Bergvall, who returned to Spurs during this international period. But at the moment, it's only a precaution. So we'll keep you updated if we do hear more. But we know with Spurs and the way they are that we don't always get to have the full insight until Ange Postecoglou sits in amongst the presser, of course, ahead of the game against West Ham United. So again, we'll bring you more as we get it. Now, Ange, during this international break, has recently given an interview to Open to Sport with Mark Schwarzer, in which he reflected on the defeat to Brighton before the international break. And he said, I don't like sitting on a loss. You want to get it out of your system and you want to move on to the next challenge in hand. And you know what? I have a tendency to kind of overanalyze and overemphasize things, but it wasn't a good one. It was a sore one. We had 5 wins in a row, and that first half was unbelievable against Brighton, probably as well as we've played all year. I just didn't like the things that I saw in the second half. Didn't like what we looked like. It's not just a loss. That was painful, but it was the manner in the way we went about it. You know what international football is like when the game finishes? Everyone goes. The dressing room after the game is not the time to analyse. So I've been sitting on it for 10 days, and mate, I'm ready to explode when I get back in the building. That will be my therapy. Now, Ange, we'll come on to what he said in the rest of that interview in a second. But, guys, I just want to discuss where we are at the moment with Spurs under Ange, if I can. You know, in terms of this season, we've played 10 games in all competitions. We've won 6 of the 10. We've drawn 1. We've lost the other 3. Premier League-wise, as we know, it's 3 wins, 3 defeats, 1 draw in there. We've scored 14. We've conceded 8. Of course, it's not where we want to be in terms of the table. Spurs currently sitting 9th. When you reflect back on the, obviously, previous season at this point, Spurs were 2nd. Paul, where are we in the project under Ange Postecoglou as we go into, well, the next real big set of fixtures now in this October period to come?
I think we're sitting okay, Ricky. I really do. I mean, the last time I was on was just after the Man United win, so it was easy for me to be positive after that game, wasn't it? But I think we're doing okay. Obviously, Brighton was a huge disappointment, wasn't it? It was awful, and the manner in which we collapsed in the second half was unacceptable. And you know, to see Ange afterwards, he looked completely crushed, didn't he? But I do think it was down to errors and down to the mentality of the players and complacency of the players rather than any systemic problems. And that is the encouragement I've taken from the last week and a half, in that I don't think it was Ange being found out. I don't think even it was anything to do with his late substitutions or anything like that. I think the players switched off, and there's some calamitous individual errors that you can't really legislate for. So I think we're sitting fine. I know this season hasn't been quite as good as last season and as how we would wanted it for Ange's second season so far. But I think we're okay. It's been horrible having nearly 2 weeks to wait for the next game, as is always the case. But I'm feeling confident going into Saturday, and I'm also confident after listening to Vince Rigari here on your last show. I thought that was a fascinating show, and he made me keep the faith as well. And the many positive things he was saying about Ange, which he features in his new book, which you featured the other day. So no, I'm sitting here still positive, but we do need to beat West Ham on Saturday to make sure we're on the right track. That's for sure.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Paul. We had, as you mentioned, a really fascinating show with Vince Rigari, who recently wrote a book on Ange Postecoglou. And I think it's just a reminder out there that Ange has been in this same process with a lot of the clubs that he's been at. And to be fair, this is what he enjoys the most. He enjoys the most when it is going through a tricky period to navigate and find a way to make the team successful. I mean, Vince, I think, did admit that he is probably not seen as the most fractured fan base as the one at Spurs in the last God knows how many years that he's experienced. But what I had to remind Vince is that, you know, this is a fan base that's not waited just 2 or 3 years to have success. We waited 15, 16 years. So the reality is that with that does come a lot of sore tissue. And I think the concerning thing is, Simon, as though as you are probably, I've got to say, when many use the word cesspit to describe X or Twitter, you are one of those voices many go to try and get some form of therapeutic needs at a time of real concerns in the fan base. And I think that's why, again, many draw on you for a lot of the positive feelings around at the moment. But, you know, the crazy thing is, if Tottenham had beaten Brighton, that would have been their 6th straight win in all competitions. The first time that would happen since 2019 under the dizzying heights of Jose Mourinho, which I joked to Jason, who you know what kind of look Jason McGovern gave me when I told him that about Jose Mourinho. But I think the only thing I would say, which is concerning under Ange in some of these away games that I look at, that second half wise, I look even back at last season, you know, Wolves, Everton, West Ham, we seem to really struggle to retain a threat on the counter when leading sometimes. How much is that a concern for you, Simon? And are you seeing enough of the learning of lessons in this season for you?
First of all, thanks so much for those compliments. It's a blessing and a curse, to be honest with you. I mean, sometimes you just want to be angry, but I do feel a responsibility to just kind of leave my emotions behind and time to look at it rationally. It was hard after that second half against Brighton, because I think we saw something we haven't really seen before, which is, from my perspective, we played probably one of our best halves that first 45 minutes. And then to come out and just stop playing our game was kind of worrying to me, because I think if we conceded in the 60th or 70th minute, I think you could look at fatigue or, you know, stuff that are rational that you could point to. But when you come out and it's a mentality thing, you start to look at the coach in a different way. You start to look at, have he lost the players? And it becomes a little bit more unspecific. And it's also something we haven't seen before. If we've seen anything, it's that these guys are 100% behind Ange. They will run into a wall, but we haven't seen them. We've seen them lose concentration and focus, but not stop playing, stop running, stop doing the basics in this way. So I have to admit, it was the first time I was kind of almost close to use the word worried or concerned, which we Spurs fans like to use too often, I think. But after thinking about it, I think this was the first time we actually scored 2 goals in the first half. I went through our results, and we've never been able to kind of go up that quickly, scoring 2 goals against an opponent. And I think the team kind of felt this relief of, look how easy this is. So they kind of relaxed. And to be honest, we play in a very different way. Ange wants us to score a 3rd and a 4th. And so I think it's easy for players that have had probably coaches before in their professional life who's told them to sit back, to protect the lead, not to kind of go back to that base level instinct. So to me, looking at it from that perspective, it feels like it's a new kind of challenge that we met through us getting better. That will face us, that will see us face new challenges. And so I think we failed our first attempt at that new challenge, but I do think it's something that Ange will be able to kind of talk to the players about and be able to address. I think it would be harder if it was just something, you know, players not believing or something like that, that goes to the heart of what we're trying to do. But this, I think, is something we could address. To your other point about us, you know, conceding in the second half, which I think is an actual problem we've had. I think that's fatigue. We played the most intense type of football in the league. I mean, if you look at all the stats, we are by far the most intense team. We run more, we press more. Our whole game plan is focused on that part of our game, and so players will get fatigued. And so it's important that Ange is proactive with making changes and us having depth. And so again, I think that's something we'll have to continue to keep our eye on, but it's not something I'm worried about in the long haul, because as our players get more fitness, as our depth gets better, as they understand that they can never relax, whatever happens, we'll probably see us concede less. But no system and no way of playing comes with no weaknesses. This is probably one of our biggest. So it's something we should keep our eye on, but it's not something that I'm overly concerned about.
I mean, that's fair points there. George, you know what, we discussed, obviously, of course, maybe giving more credit to Brighton, who did turn that game on its head. But I think it's all worked very well. Spurs obviously wanting to entertain, and Ange puts it in many words before the game. But it was another game that Spurs lost control from a position of strength. And you know what, I think Spurs are missing that ability to manage these situations like a top team, that when you do get a couple of goals in front, you've got to find a way of seeing out those games. And again, whether that's due to lack of maturity or due to not switching on, I'm sure, like I say, Ange, as we've seen him, probably the most angry we saw him after that Brighton game, could see that the team, for whatever reason, didn't switch on in that second half. And as soon as Brighton got the first one, I've got to say, in the second half, I felt like there was only going to be one winner. That result, of course, did mean for Spurs, it was their worst start to a Premier League season after 7 games since the 08-09 season, where they only got 2 points after 7 games. I don't think it feels like, though, George, does it? It doesn't feel like it's been our worst start to a season since that many years ago. So where are we, George, for you in this Postecoglou project at the moment, as we do enter quite a critical next set of fixtures, which sandwiched in, as many know how important it is to me, is that Carabao Cup tie against Manchester City as well.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely feels nowhere near like the worst start since 2008, or whenever you just said. I think as well, it's I guess if you're looking at it from game to game or fixture to fixture, especially compared to last year, for me personally, I think performances have improved in all of those games. If you think back to Arsenal at home last year, where the players didn't even turn up for the first half and let in sloppy goals, we were absolutely out the game by half time. Don't think that was the case at all this time around. Same with Newcastle, completely out of it. I think this time we should have come away with a win. We didn't. We got punished on the break, which seems to be a little bit of a theme so far this season. But where I'm completely fine with Ange so far is that, for the most part, I'm seeing consistent performances every week. It's just what we saw against Brighton. There seems to be a massive drop-off in the second half. And I think a lot of that does come down to the maturity of the players, because we are building a younger team. As much as someone like Højbjerg, for example, doesn't necessarily fit the system for Ange, he just has that experience and know-how to see out matches when he comes on as a sub later on, which is where we may have seen out some other matches. But because we're still trying to build in Ange's vision, the current crop of players are extremely young. And I think what seems to be the pattern right now is, against away teams, any amount of pressure in that second half, when the home crowd all of a sudden is galvanized and they're back in their team, the players seem to crumble a bit. That happened at Leicester, it happened at Newcastle, it happened at Brighton. Luckily with Man United, they were just terrible, so that never came. But I think the players are just currently, they're a very young crop of players, and I don't think it's anything to do with Ange's system, or I don't think he can coach out specifically in training sessions. I think it's just a matter of continuing the progress. It's going to be game on game. How are you going to react in the next away fixture when the team gets galvanized? So that sort of thing. So I think it's just a case it's going to come in time. The performances to me have been very good. It's just players buckling under pressure a little bit and maybe being too tired. But then again, to play devil's advocate, that is also on Ange to be, like Sam was saying, a bit more proactive with the substitutes, because I think any of us watching that second half against Brighton, from the first 5 minutes, it was just one-way traffic with Brighton, and he wasn't willing just to tweak. It could be a sub just to bring on fresh legs. You don't have to change the system or anything. Just bring on fresh legs, and he wasn't willing to do that until we were already 3-2 down in the 80th minute. So I think there's definitely some learnings he can take, but also I think us as a fan base, we just sort of need to hope that the players can start learning how to process the tougher away fixtures, or when the fans are galvanized in those games.
That's fair. Ange has addressed some of the criticism that he's taken recently. Let's just quickly hear from him on this clip, which he did give to Open Sport earlier in the week.
I don't want to be like everyone else.
First thing people say is the way you play, the style of football. Can it be played in the Premier League? Should you be more pragmatic? I know you'll say probably you don't really listen to it, but it's hard not to hear it. What do you do? What do you think about it when you hear those criticisms?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's impossible to kind of block out, because even if I don't hear it or read it, somebody will. I also don't need to, because I already know what they'd be saying. So it's not kind of new to me. But from my perspective, it's about, well, what everyone is wanting me to do is what everyone else does. Now, I'm just not going to do that, because there's a reason that I'm here where I am today. It's not because I've done what everyone else does. I think everyone has their own sort of unique journey to get to somewhere. I didn't get here by doing what everyone else is doing. So I get that people say, well, be more pragmatic like everyone else. I don't want to be like everyone else. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm going to be successful necessarily, and my approach is going to work. But what I'm not going to do is just become one of the masses, because if I do that, then what's the point? I mean, I'm going to get lost in that, and eventually I'll sort of fade away and not make the impact I want to. So, you know, what others see as kind of stubbornness or me being dogmatic about something, I see as just real belief in what I'm doing.
He's a man not for turning. Listen, he's a man not for turning. Ange Postecoglou very much believing in what he does. And again, that kind of backs up what Paul said earlier, that Vince Agari, you had on the show earlier this week, mentioned that point that, you know, Ange will stick to his principles. He will not let anybody ruffle his feathers, and will very much believe in what he's trying to do. We're going to come back to Ange very, very shortly, but it's a jam-packed last word on Spurs, which we've got to cram in as much as what has happened over the last couple of weeks. Some news to bring to you that obviously we maybe thought was not going to be the case, but Ryan Mason is to remain at Tottenham Hotspur after an approach from Belgian side Anderlecht. It looked like a foregone conclusion. Spurs were going to lose Ryan Mason to the Belgian side. However, we understand that now all parties have come to the conclusion that it's the best interest of those parties that Ryan remains at Tottenham and will continue his role within the Australians coaching staff, which contains Matt Wells, Nick Montgomery, Sergio Raimondo, and Millie Jedinak, and goalkeeping coach Rob Birch. And you know what, for Ryan, it's an interesting moment, because it was an opportunity to potentially go and take his first job into management, but it isn't meant to be. Ryan sticks with Tottenham Hotspur and will carry on being part of Ange Postecoglou's coaching staff. Of course, if there was more news to bring you on it, we would. It'll be interesting if we do get any words from Ange Postecoglou on that in his presser on Friday. But from one bit of news to another, and that's the news that I think has come very much left field that many weren't expecting, and that is that Djed Spence has signed a new contract with Tottenham until the summer of 2028. Now, the player was signed from Borough back in 2022. The defender's contract had been due to expire in 2027 before he penned fresh terms. At this point, no real comments on that by Ange Postecoglou or Djed Spence directly. And you've got to say it's been quite the turnaround for the player, who many thought were going to be definitely out the door at the summer point. He was obviously linked with a move to Genoa, which never materialised. He worked his way back into Ange Postecoglou's plans. Paul, I ironically joked on here a few weeks ago that Djed Spence, I thought, actually could have provided one of the moments to save the season. Spurs were going out of the League Cup. At that point, I think it would have been 2 defeats. Well, I think it would have been at that point only 2 wins in the last 17 away games. It has seen obviously Spurs set up a crunch tie with Man City in the next round of the Carabao Cup. Are you surprised by the timing of Spence's contract?
Yeah, I guess I am, Ricky, but I'm pleased about it. Yeah, we were saying last time I was on, I think that goal could be hugely significant, couldn't it? That could be the Mark Robins moment for Ange when we look back on a few years' time, because we really were awful that night. And even however positive I tried to be about Spurs under Ange, I couldn't be throughout that game until those last couple of minutes when we scored 2 really good goals. And Spence came on and looked really good, didn't he, even before scoring that equaliser. I'm really pleased. I'm guessing it's a pay rise for him, really, because as you say, he's only adding a year onto his contract. It wasn't due to run out until 2027 anyway. So it's a pay rise, as you say. No comments from him, but I think it's good. It proves that he's very much part of the squad now. And as we've all said, I think it doesn't need hindsight to tell you that he should have been in the Europa League squad. And that remains a mystery, and it remains a mistake by Ange, especially with Udogie being not only suffering with injury problems, but his form wasn't great against Brighton either, was it? So you'd want to have that alternative to him for the Europa League side, and Spence would have been ideal, even though it is on his wrong foot playing on the left side. So I'm pleased. I think it's, as you say, it's a great turnaround. He was destined not to be part of Conte's plans from the start, wasn't he? But he's clearly won Ange round. He didn't have a chance to do so last summer. He's done it now, and maybe this is also some sort of thank you for his understanding and not being in the Europa League squad, because that must have been a disappointment to him. And maybe this is Ange's way of saying, look, you really are part of our plans, and we'll look at that again in January. And you're going to get minutes in hopefully in the League Cup next week against Man City and in the Premier League. So a good move, I think, and fair play to Djed Spence for turning it around.
Yeah, totally agree on that. I mean, I've got to say on this point, George, bringing you in, and we'll get someone back in a second. Interesting timing, I thought, George, in regards to the point of when to sign the contract, because, the guy hasn't really featured maybe as much as he would want to, of course, left out of the Europa League squad. Does that timing surprise you at all, George? Does the actual deal surprise you, the fact that he has extended for a further year to the original contract expiry date, which was 2027?
Yeah, it does surprise a bit because, I mean, like you said, he hasn't necessarily featured as much, but I mean, in those appearances, he has done very well. So I think it's again just sort of reassuring what Paul said. I think it's more of like a promise to him that, look, we're happy with the turnaround. And to be fair, I don't think any of us earlier this year in like January, February could have called for this Spence sort of arc into the first team now. So hopefully, yeah, like you said, it's a bit more of a promise to him that he's in the plans, and probably is just more of a pay rise now that he's not on loan 2 years in a row. So yeah.
We will see in terms of obviously how much more game time we will get. A statement from Spurs, we're delighted to announce Djed has signed a new contract with the club, which will run until 2028, having joined the club in July 2022 from Middlesbrough. Djed has made 10 appearances in our colours to date and registered his first competitive goal for us last month in our victory against Coventry in the Carabao Cup. The 24-year-old previously spent time on loan with Stade Rennais, Leeds United, and most recently Serie A side Genoa for the second half of the 23-24 campaign. On the international stage, Djed has featured for the England under-21s on 6 occasions after making his debut for the Young Lions in March 2022. So a very short statement from Tottenham. I wonder for you, Simon, how surprised you was by this news, because I've got to be honest with you, I didn't really see it coming. And it's an interesting one because, again, he isn't featuring in the European squad. That has led to several questions as to whether Ange Postecoglou truly really does fancy him as a player. But given he has signed that new contract, do you think that puts to bed any questions as to whether he's in Ange Postecoglou's long-term plans?
No, absolutely. I think they might have been surprised about his turnaround. Like, the biggest surprise was him being included in the first place. I think we all, even me, who still believed in him and still thought he was a good player and never really believed in the narrative around his attitude. I 100% thought he was not going to be staying around, but I think he has, by his performances, and that's Paul first pointed out, this feels more like a reward to him in terms of his wages, and just to give him a tap on the shoulder and say, we believe in you, and try to recommit to him at the club long term. But yeah, I was surprised, but I have to say, I mean, the credit goes to him, because to be sent away the way he was, and to not give up on himself and not push for a move, but to still believe in himself and his ability to get back into this team and stay committed to that belief is admirable for someone of his age. And yeah, I'm super proud of him. As Paul also pointed out, I'm confused about him being in a European squad, even though I do understand that there's some logic to it with them believing in Foster more than we do. But I mean, the way he's been playing and the way he's showed up in the Carabao Cup, it's clear to see that he would have been a much better inclusion than Forster. So no, all credit goes to him. Super impressed, and I'm happy for him.
Yeah, do agree. We'll see how much game time he does get. And like Paul mentions there, possibly his next game could come against Man City in the Crunch Carabao Cup tie, which for me is the biggest game of the season. But we'll save that for later on down the line. What we are going to go for our first break of the show for our listeners and audio. We've got nearly over 2,000 of you that are watching us live on X, on Instagram, on Facebook, and on YouTube. So, guys, thank you so much as always for your incredible support for the show. I have to say a big thank you to everybody that has voted for the Last Word on Spurs in the upcoming Football Content Awards, where we are nominated for not 1, not 2, but 3 nominations of awards to come. God, listen, as I've said before, we've gone into that
With
Tottenham
a
Hotspur Stadium.
personal one for you there as well, there, Rick.
I don't know what's happened there, George. I mean, I can't believe I'm up there for Fabrizio Romano. Something definitely has gone wrong there. There must have been something going wrong in the nomination category.
Levels above him.
He can't believe he's there with you, man.
I'm not sure about that. I don't think you can probably believe he's with me. I can't believe I'm with him. But listen, we'll see how we'll get along with that. But as I said, hopefully, like I say, hopefully it'll be a trophy for us there in that Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Like I say, a big night in store and one we'll look forward to. And again, we can't thank you enough for all your support for the show, guys. Like I said, I mean, listen, we've done this for 7-8 years. It feels like it's been longer. I'm not gonna lie. I think it's aged all of us, and it's killed Jason off twice, and he's come back twice. So here we are, and we're still going. So listen, thank you so much.
It's why I look so much younger than you guys. I wasn't on the pod.
Simon's 2 shows in. He's not aging at all yet. George, I'm not sure. George, you're using amazing
give him a year.
moisturiser, aren't you, George? I mean,
I'm only 27. It's aged me.
Yeah, but you've been. I mean, Paul's last few appearances before that was Nuno. So, God, can you imagine what that did to all of us? I tell you.
Well, absolutely. I had a full head of hair, but when I came on when Nuno was a manager,
I'm not sure I'm sending it to Paul that I want to get Paul on a more regular basis. I might kill him off if I keep sending this how it's aging us. But we are going to turn our attention, guys, to some recent news that has been in the media with Tottenham. It's been swirling around about potential investment from Amanda Staveley. Now, I mean, look, it's been an interesting, last few weeks with Amanda Staveley and the links to Tottenham, because the noise around it late is that there is a potential investment, a minority investment that Spurs are after. Now, Daniel Levy admitted in the recent fans forum that he was open to looking at a minority investment for the club. He said, we announced our last results that we believe this club needs a bigger capital base because we've got a lot of exciting projects on the horizon and we want to make further investments into the team. Some form of minority investment is what we're looking for. We've got nothing to announce at the moment, but we are in the market. Now, we know Daniel has been the chairman of Spurs for the past 23 years, taking the lead at the club a few months after ENIC bought the North Londoners from Alan Sugar. He's been pretty much flying solo, really, since that point, but is now, like I say, understood to be looking for investment. Now, many would have noticed that it's not the first time Amanda Staveley has been linked to Tottenham. She's attended, from what we understand, recently on a couple of occasions. She was spotted during Spurs' win against Brentford with husband as well, Murdrad Gudassi, if I pronounce that correctly. And also she was spotted most recently at the recent NFL fixture that took place at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Paul, I touched with you on this off air that normally, if you're doing things secretively, you're going out your way to not be papped, to not be filmed, to not be taken pictures of at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. With your connections deep into media, Paul, how much do you really buy into the links to Amanda Staveley? Do you think there's something concrete there where there seems to be some interest in Tottenham?
I really do, Rick. I think there is something in it. I've spoken to a few of the guys at my old paper, and they definitely think there's something into it, and they think it's money not only from the Middle East but also from America, but not Saudi Arabia. They said, which will be a comfort to many of us, I'm sure, who would rather the Saudis kept away from our football club. But there's supposed to be Middle East interest and American interest. And Staveley, of course, is the broker, isn't she? She's not an investor herself. She brings these people to the party. I think there's something in it. And as you said, Ricky, Levy said that he wants this minority investment. The interesting thing to me is clearly Levy wants this investment, but he also wants to keep on running the club, doesn't he? So how's that going to? We know that he's a control freak. We know that his fingerprints are on everything at Spurs. So, and we also know from her time at Newcastle that Amanda Staveley is a very visible presence. She was the public face of Newcastle and the public face of the Saudi takeover, wasn't she? Until it all went wrong for her and her husband there last summer. So I'm interested to know how that will work if she does come in. Will she want to have more of an influence than Levy will want? Will she want to be more of a visible presence than Levy has always been? Because it looks like a clash of styles to me. Levy always likes to do things in private. I think she gave more interviews in her 2 years at Newcastle than he's given in 23 years at Spurs. So I'm just interested to know. It seems to me as if Levy says, yeah, we'll take some extra money, please, so we can try and compete with Man City, and we can try and compete with Liverpool, etc. But I don't actually want you to have any say. I'll carry on running. I'll carry on making all the big decisions. So where that leads with somebody who's as high profile as Amanda Staveley, I don't know. But I do think there's something in it. And I think the potential money is apparently coming from both the Middle East and America.
Fascinating stuff, Paul. Thank you so much for that. I mean, look, she's made no desire of her secret to get back into football. She spoke to Athletic recently and said, Murdad and I are sure keen to be hands-on. We're hard-working people. I love to be very busy and engaged. I love football. Very sadly, we have to move on to other projects, and that might involve us taking stake in another club or buying another club, and that's difficult. But it's possible. I mean, there's no doubt about it, actually, someone coming over to you, that she seems quite distraught to leave Newcastle. It doesn't feel like on the eyes of things it was a mutual decision, although we understand, I think at the time she had a 3-year, period to do what she was going to do. Then she was always going to likely exit. I mean, what's your feeling, someone, about this potential investment? And I suppose the key thing is, we've kind of Paul's touched upon there, is how you would see that dynamic working, because Daniel Levy is very much hands-on. Amanda Staveley seems very much hands-on as well. And as Paul said, she's not shy of an interview. How do you see this potential proposition playing out?
I mean, I got two things. First of all, the picture I just saw, the Photoshop picture, so menacing. Her face all made me laugh. That's amazing. The second part is, I got so many questions about this, because as Paul points out there, it makes you think about how the ownership structure looks now. So ENIC owns, what is it, 86%, and Levy owns 30%, and the Lewis Trust, is it called, owns 70%. So my first question is, what part of the shares are being sold? Is Levy going to keep his ownership structure? And because he owns now, if you look at it through that lens, he owns 25% and they own 60%. So is it the Lewis Trust and him with his legal issues? Is it them trying to get out of, try to get money back for their shares and trying to get out of the
because it got handed around to his lawyers and family? I think they've wanted out since then. So I imagine it's all of Lewis's.
Yeah. So that means it basically means that if the money is for them buying their shares and trying to also buy shares from the 14% that fans or the public owns, okay, now we have a structure where you have to ask, what's the point? What's the ultimate goal? We know Levy not only wants to stay and wants to keep being the chairman, we also know that he built this club. So in his mind, it has to be about selling the club in the long term to get the maximum profits. So him selling shares to someone else to broker a deal down the line, that's just him giving away, that would be him giving away profits or cash that he might not need now. So to me, I look at it through the lens of, okay, is this someone coming in and just buying shares and not putting anything into the club? In that case, it doesn't really change much for us. But it seems to be about cash flow, getting more cash flow into the club so they can, because Levy's done a lot of the groundwork. He's built this revenue stream and he's built this club into this monster of revenue. But that final push, which comes with success, getting Champions League money on the regular, getting better sponsorship deals, naming rights for the stadium. To reach that, he wants more cash flow. Okay, so he can sell shares to get that cash flow in. Is this someone? It's not going to be someone like at Manchester United coming in and taking control of the business of the sporting, running the sporting part. So is this just someone coming in now with the aim of buying the club later, like taking total ownership, like ENIC did in the beginning, or is this just a maneuver to get Lewis out and to structure this, to set the ball up for this longer term deal? There's so many questions around this that we don't know yet. And on that, you got what we talked about earlier, which is this Saudi money? Is it Qatar money? What kind of moral boundaries come with that? And also, we've seen Chelsea, what can happen when you deal with state ownership or money that comes from a country that could all of a sudden come under sanctions and stuff like that. So I mean, to me, because it feels real, it just opens up a whole wall of questions. And I don't know, I know you guys are three of the most ITK guys out there, so you might have answers for some of these questions. But that will be my present, question: how much is going to be sold? If it's 25%, who's 25%, and what's the long-term goal with selling that 25%? I mean, is it just because it can't be that she comes in, takes percentage 12% or whatever, to just act as a, what do you call those people that sell houses?
Estate agents?
Broker?
Yeah, like
Broker?
an estate agent.
Yeah.
Because if it's US money, he doesn't really need her help. So it has to be about something bigger in the long term. Because we know Levy is smart with the dealings.
It's interesting. It does throw up a lot of questions. Bear in mind, Simon's reckon we're all ITK. I'll just go straight to George. George, when we buy in Haaland, when we buy in the league?
Well, Mbappe's next year, and then no, I mean, yeah, I know nothing either. But and again, raises so many questions. But in my mind, and now this is me just trying to throw on my economics hat now. From
throw it on, George. Throw it on. Throw it on for us.
It has to be for a full sale later down the line, in my opinion, because where Levy and I guess Enoch in general have built the club to the point that they have. They've managed to get the new stadium in. The revenue is the highest, I think, of any football team, bar maybe Real Madrid. It could even still be top across Europe on like a match day. The fact that we've already got partnerships with F1, NFL, and loads more, to be honest with you, all the concerts that are continuously increasing every single year. And with the fact that I think the only thing that's missing is to have an official NFL team that actually plays at Spurs, to be honest with you. I think there's not, and obviously the hotels that are going up alongside it. I think once that's complete, there's not much more really that they can do on a grand commercial scale that's going to massively increase the value of the club. The next thing is just success and winning trophies and being a club that major players want to join.
And just can I add something to what you're saying, George? That part is also what a new ownership can benefit from.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Because that's where their profits can come from. Because he's done all that other work that you just talked about.
Exactly. I think Levy has an exit plan. He's a very clever businessman. He's going to have an exit plan for Spurs and potentially buy the next club that he wants to do up or another sport, whatever. And I think now that almost everything around the stadium is settled, I think this is the start of new ownership potentially getting a smaller chunk at first. Hopefully the money's invested in the football side, which I imagine would be the aim of the new owners, because that's all that's left is for the club now to be successful, and that will generate the revenue later down the line in years to come. So I think I think they'll buy in a smaller share to begin with, inject the cash flow, hopefully allows the football team to start becoming successful, and then they'll gradually eat away at more shares and take full control at Spurs. That's the only way in my mind I can see it going. If Levy waits too long, the value that he'll get for the club will just diminish. So he's got to have a figure in mind that he knows he wants to sell his shares for, and I think we're approaching a lot closer to it now.
I think I'm quite right about there is that we listed the completion of the hotels before the success, which is probably we've become conditioned to over the last 15
this
years.
is the ownership mindset that they have right now. It's clearly all commercial, and then
it is frightening, though, isn't it? The hotels are the more a priority than what the bringing of the trophies are.
Don't shoot the messenger.
I know, I'm not George. We're all ITK here, all ITK apparently. We love you, Simon. Paul, I want to ask you just back on that point. I wonder how you see that dynamic working with someone like Amanda Staveley. You put it up there, she's given more interviews than Daniel has in the last 24, 25 years of being at the football club. Is there a world in which they can both work together in harmony? Or do you think that would have to be a relationship where there'd have to be a lot of back scratching, massaging to get that relationship to work in the short term? Because the reason why I say that is that I can't imagine a world where Daniel doesn't want the control, even with a minority owner. I just can't see that. Can you?
I think that's the key, Ricky. I thought it's very interesting what George and Simon said there. I think there's some really interesting points on where this is going. The key is, I think, can he let go? Can he let go? Yes, maybe he is working on an exit plan. Surely Enoch will want to sell at some point. But he just doesn't seem to be the type of character who's going to take a back seat to me. We heard previously that there were stories that if ever we were taken over, he would like to stay on as chief executive. Now it seems to be you know, I want this extra investment, and these would be new shares, I think, so that we get extra investment to try and take on these nation states who own these other clubs. But, you know, I'm still going to be running the ship. And I do think that would be an uneasy marriage with someone like Amanda Staveley, only from what I've seen of her and what I've seen of what happened at Newcastle. And that all ended in tears, of course, last summer. And Eddie Howe seems to really regret that, because he very much enjoyed working with her and her husband, I believe. So I think the big question is, can Levy work with someone else? Can he actually let go? Because we've also seen it with directors of football, haven't we? And people who have come into the club supposedly to take over the transfers. And then we hear that it's Levy doing the deal. You know, now maybe Johan Lang is actually doing the deal now, and maybe Scott Munn is taking over the running of the club, but his fingerprints still seem to be over everything. And I would question whether he could ever let go, whether he could ever hand over to someone else. And certainly it will be a clash of styles if Amanda Staveley comes in. That would be fascinating to watch, that's for sure. As long as it is for the betterment of our club, and there's no clash there for the detriment of Spurs.
Interesting. Someone come in there for us.
Yeah, can I just ask a question to you guys? Because I feel like there's also a pride part where Levy has built this club this far, and you know, people talk a lot about ENIC and Levy not wanting success. And whilst I understand where that opinion comes from, or where that belief comes from, to me, success from Levy's standpoint, why I think he wants success, is because he wants to sell the club at the maximum profit. Like he wants to get back as much as he put in, and so that's part of it. And the other part is he has to have pride. I think he wants to leave the club after it winning something, because taking all these years of abuse and not taking it all the way, just from what I've gleaned from his personality, not winning that deal feels uncharacteristic. It comes to my Swedish accent there.
Yeah. No.
See what I'm saying? So do you feel like even if he brings her in, or someone, a minority owner in, wouldn't there be really clear terms and conditions in that? Like you have to, you buy these shares, you invest this much, and then in 2 years you buy this much and you put this much in, and etc. Because it feels like if he made a deal, he would have really clear, you know, constraints on it, or structure to it.
I think that's it. Say, George, if you agree on that point, George, I can't imagine her coming in, like Simon says, without there being a clear strategy on focus about what she'll be tasked to do, even if it's a minority, you know, a minority percentage in there. George, is that how you'd see it for you?
Yeah, and I think because the only images I have in my mind is the behind the scenes at Newcastle, where she was extremely hands-on in the deal of getting Gordon to Newcastle. And we heard from Johan Lange's interview a few weeks ago, or whenever that was, that I think he explained that Levy, even though he's not involved at all in the decision-making on who to sign, he's still very much involved on the actual structure of the deals and getting the players in. And it seems to be fairly similar to what she was doing in Newcastle. But I think Simon's right. There's no way she would come in and risk this major investment into a new Premier League club if there wasn't some sort of understanding of the control that she has within the football club. Like, surely she's not just going to be a liaison for the actual investors to just say, oh, we need an extra 50 mil this summer. Can you get it done? And then Levy's going to do the deal. I don't know if that necessarily works. So in my mind, surely there's clearly a plan from Levy of an exit at some point, if he's allowing someone like Amanda to come in to actually have some form of control with the money, I guess, if that makes any sense.
It does. I mean, I suppose the key thing to maybe ask you, Paul, to finish off on this subject is, how realistic time frame, Paul, do you put on this in terms of it happening? Can you see it happening this season, end of the season, next season? Do you have a vision in mind about when you could see this actually come into fruition?
I would suggest sooner rather than later, actually. I would suggest certainly over the next few months, possibly by the end of the season. Things do seem to be happening. Things do seem to be happening quickly, don't they? As you say, she's been seen at the Spurs Stadium twice in the last 4 weeks. And that could be said to be a coincidence. That could be said to be that she's an NFL fan or whatever. She wanted to see the Chicago Bears. But I think this is probably happening sooner rather than later now. Not that I'm an expert in big business by any means, or certainly not the workings of Daniel Levy's mind. But they've publicly said that they want this investment. They've publicly said that they're seeking it. And as you say, these things are normally done in private, but the fact that this has been public, and the fact that some good sources now are saying there is definitely something in this for Amanda Staveley, leads me to believe that it will happen in the next few months.
Listen, we shall see on that. Like I say, in terms of the snippets that we've had, in terms of a bit of paper talk over the past week or so, if you've been under a rock, there's been a few suggestions that Pedro Porro is an option being considered by Real Madrid, whose priority target, though, is Trent Alexander-Arnold. Interestingly, though, Madrid's interest in signing a centre-back has seen Christian Romero not listed amongst the targets, despite there being a lot of reports last summer of Romero being highly on the Spanish club's list. And another thing that was denied during this international break is that there is no €65 million release clause in Cuti Romero's contract at Spurs, despite reports from Argentina. We know that Tottenham considered him untouchable last summer, despite an interest from a number of top clubs. And as we understand it, Spurs are trying to engage Romero over terms of a new contract, but nothing as of yet. I mean, many would ask where Romero's head has been since the start of the season, if it has been here or in Madrid. But listen, it's another subject we won't dive into too much. What we are going to do, we are going to go for our final break of the show. For our listeners on audio, you're going to hear from the West Ham Way podcast to give you an audio preview of that to come. And we're going to turn our attention, guys, to the big game now, to West Ham United at the weekend. Now, it's not pretty reading for Ange, this. And listen, I know Ange, bless him, watches the show, or his brother watches the show, I've been told. So sorry, Ange, when I tell you this. In big London derbies out of a possible 6, it's 0 wins so far, as George there very kindly tells the audience, and he's only taken a point, West Ham away being that only point. Not a great record in terms of the London derbies. Paul, is this the perfect game to come back to, West Ham and London derby? Is it the worst when, again, for context for our, obviously, viewers all around the world, it's a 12:30, 12:45 kickoff, which we know for the UK, look, us UKers, we're not great with early kickoffs. So, good or a bad thing, Paul, West Ham to come, and how do you feel about that kickoff time itself?
Well, I think I always worry about West Ham because it's their cup final, isn't it? They always want to beat us so badly. Personally speaking, I've got nothing against West Ham. I don't like Arsenal. I don't like Chelsea very much, but I've got nothing against West Ham. I used to write about them many years ago for a local newspaper. So I was quite fond of them in a small way back in the day. They always raise their game against us. What you would say is that they've had a poor start to the season, haven't they? Before that 4-1 win against Ipswich, there seemed to be problems for Lopetegui quite early on in his reign, and all was not, perceived to be well at West Ham. So, okay, they've beaten Ipswich 4-1. We know that Ipswich are a promoted side who have not made a great start themselves. So, really, I don't think we should have anything to worry about in West Ham. Yeah, that statistic from London derbies last year is awful, isn't it? It really is. Not to have a win in a big London derby for the whole of Ange's first season is not good at all. But obviously, you go back to in recent years, West Ham were the first team to win at the new stadium, weren't they? And Mikel Antonio was the first opposing player to score a goal there. I think that was 5 years ago now. So they will be desperate to beat us. I just think that I think the real Spurs will turn up on Saturday. I think after what happened against Brighton, Ange has said in that great interview with Mark Schwarzer there, hasn't he, that he'll be raring to go. I think the players will be raring to go to put this right, actually, because I do believe that they're all fully invested in this project. And I really think we'll come out flying and we'll have too much for West Ham. I sincerely hope so anyway, because I couldn't bear them winning their cup final again, that's for sure.
It's fair to say that. I 100% agree on that. I mean, look, in terms of the most notable results, Paul's picked up on the big one there. Obviously, they've won at the stadium, first cup 2 at the stadium back in 2019 of April. Also, last December, look, they recovered, again, you've got to say that game they beat Spurs at, where Spurs were winning under Ange. And to be fair, it was at a similar point to this where we were trying to find our feet really in terms of the season. And look, when you look back at that defeat we had at home to them last season, it came off the back of, as we know, the defeat to Chelsea. Spurs really struggling that period. We had a number of players out. I just wonder for you, Simon, how big is the need for a reaction here? Because Ange, to be fair, when we put this into context, I think was the most scathing he has been about the group after that Brighton result. And I think it's interesting now to see the dynamic and to see what the reaction is like from the players, because it is a big London derby. And I quoted the record there at the start, coming into this part of the show, that, no London derby wins against Arsenal, Chelsea, West Ham. To be fair, these are the games that as fans that we love to win the most. We want to win the most. So is there pressure, Simon, going into this game? And how do you expect Spurs to deal with that pressure and the players to deal with that pressure, Simon? We might need you to unmute for us from your end.
I mean, huge pressure to me. I mean, first and foremost, I think that Brighton loss is the worst loss we've had under Ange, in my opinion, because there wasn't any excuse. There wasn't any injury. There wasn't any red cards. We came off five victories. We had a brilliant half, and then the players just stopped. And I think the one part of the reaction that I kind of understand is that we've seen this so much before. We all remember that game when the players stopped playing for the coach. We've seen it with Mourinho. We saw it with Nuno. We saw it with Conte. So we have recent trauma where we can almost pinpoint where it all went wrong. And so I do think, I don't care so much about our record against West Ham, because to me, when I look at Ange and our way of playing under Ange, we're always the protagonist. Like, if we play our football to the highest of our ability, the highest limit of our ability, we'll dominate the game and we will score goals and we will win that game. So to me, it's about that reaction. It's about them proving to us and proving to Ange that was a blip, that was, a stumble, one of those learning experiences. Because we've heard that before from players when they say, oh, we're going to learn from this and move on. And we need to see that this time, that this was just a blip. This was just something that happened. This was them getting too, basically, and stop playing. So to me, I've never felt so bad after a loss because of the manner of how it happened. And so I do feel it's important for them to win that game. And also because we need more points on the board. I mean, looking at our schedule coming up after, we got 2-3 games that we should be able to take home, to be able to win. And then we got some big games coming up. Liverpool, City, I don't remember exactly, but November and December are tough. So you don't want to start this, you don't want to start to tumble down. You want to pick yourself up and continue on that positive trend that we saw before that game. So yeah, huge game. And we have to forget that game and move on.
We do. I mean, George, I think this is the key, isn't it? I mean, he would say that this is probably the perfect game in one sense, that, for Spurs to beat West Ham really does, you feel, maybe kickstart the season. I'm conscious that I can't keep saying kickstart the season. We're in October. I mean, how many more times can I say kickstart the season when, we're nearly 3-4 months into the season? For me to be saying that is quite worrying. But what reaction do you feel will get, George, from Saturday? Because again, many will look at the fact it's an early kickoff time. Sometimes we do see these games that they're not the most free-flowing. Does the fact it's a London derby, does the fact that both teams need to win? Because let's be honest about it, West Ham probably are just as under as much pressure from the manager perspective as Ange at the moment. Lopetegui, as Paul picked up on, hasn't really made a great start there. Jury is still fairly out at the moment. And to be fair, one thing that always gets West Ham fans back on side is a win against Tottenham. So what we do know, George, and what does worry me is that West Ham, I think, have always turned up for this game. Definitely at Spurs Stadium, always turned up, which means for us, we need to be at the top of our A game. Is that fair to say that, George? They've got a good forward line there. Whether we like it or not, Kudos, Bowen, Paqueta, they can hurt teams. Whether we like it or not, they can hurt teams.
They can definitely hurt teams, but I think the problem that they're having right now is that they don't really know what their identity is in that sense, because they've got some, like you said, some very good attacking players. Even their backups, like Somerville, I think is a very good player as well. But the problem is they've got players like Kudus and Paqueta who are Bowen that are extremely good going forward, but have signed a manager that is, in a way, quite a pragmatic manager that we saw under Wolves. And I think even with their new signings at the back, with Kilman, Todibo can't get any sort of game time at the moment. I think they're really struggling at the moment to find out what their actual identity is under Lopetegui. And I think we could take advantage of that for sure. I think hopefully that win they got against Ipswich is almost like a false dawn for them, because they've kind of gone into the international break thinking, oh, this might not be too bad. But then every time they've played a decent opposition so far this season, they've practically been hammered by one draw against Brentford.
Yeah.
So I think there's a good chance to have a really good reaction. And I guess, like, if you think back for the earlier in the season as well, I think the players have been good at reacting to games. Like after the poor Leicester start, smashing Everton at the weekend, then a couple of other games in, like the Newcastle one where we could have got a result and didn't. We then went on an amazing 5-game win streak. Sorry. So I think the players are at the point where they can react really well. This is a big game to do so. And to be honest, a lot of the West Ham games hurt and sting, but I'm looking at our record now, and
we haven't got a terrible record. It's not a terrible record.
No. Away from home, we seem to struggle more, but at home, we lost that first one when they first came, but then we won 1, 2, 3, 4 out of the next 5, with the other one being a draw from that infamous Lanzini rocket.
Remember the 3-0 to the 3-0. I mean, Mourinho
that was obviously
Mourinho thought, that's it. We could never attack again. We're going to park the bus for the rest of my ride.
But yeah, then even last year we beat them 2-0, and it was a comfortable win. And even the loss last year, that was when we had West Ham and Villa back to back, and we battered both of them.
Yeah, Doggy had a bad day at the office that game. He had a bad day.
So for me personally, I'm not necessarily concerned about West Ham, even though they obviously do like to turn up against Spurs. I do just think we are in a much better position now, and I have trust that from what I've seen so far this season that we are going to get a good reaction. It's then just about, can we just continue maintaining those performances and with the results in all those important games coming up?
Yeah, I do agree on that. Absolutely. Go on, Simon. I can see you coming back at one.
I was just going to say that's the comforting part. We talk a lot about the weaknesses about Ange, but the comforting part is that it's always in our own hands. So when we had Jose, I always remember it was always about the opposition. How good were they? How good was their system? How would they play? But to me, I feel like when we play at our top, our best, we are a top 4 team easily. The problem is that we're so early into this project that we're inconsistent, which is to be expected. But when we reach our heights, we don't have to worry so much about how West Ham play, because we clearly are one of the best teams on the ball when we play up to our talent and when we reach the level that this system and this philosophy demands. So in some ways, it's easier to just pinpoint what we need. Like you, Ricky, point out, it's like, are we going to show up? And that's always the question. But it's almost, to me, it's more comforting knowing that it's in our own hands. At least we control if we are.
I'm not sure I'm comforted by the fact it's always in our own hands, because it never works. But no,
I need to work on you.
You did do a lot of work on me, Simon. I tell you, I did a lot of work done on me. It's when you said to me we're so early into the project. I wonder, on that point very quickly, so I don't want to deviate and take us off track too much. At what point do we say, right, in terms of the project, this is where we really are going to start judging where we're at? Because it feels like at the moment for some fans, like you say there, Simon, some fans feel we're so early in, we can't be judging this yet. Some fans feel, well, no, we should be judging right now. At what point, Simon, do you feel, right, we really should be judging where we're at the moment in your mind?
So to me, you need to kind of, the problem with this is that so many different things you need to look at. It's the recruitment, it's the ownership, it's the coach, it's the system, it's the players. And so at least now we have a guiding principle, and we have a guiding philosophy around how we merge all those things to work in unison. So that's good. But to get all those things in place and to work in unison, it takes time. It takes time to get the right players in. It takes time to make those players believe in what we're trying to do. And so being 15 or 17 months in, that means considering where we started, which is rip everything up from the roots, selling players, getting new players in, getting a philosophy in that's the opposite of the philosophy we had before, getting that up and running, losing our best players. And then to me, it's almost like this graph where when you start, it's really volatile. It goes up and down and up and down. And now after 1 year, we can see that it like we have dips, but it's still going upwards. And so in a year, it's going to be even more stable, because then we have better depth. The players have not only learned what they do and it's an instinct, they've also seen the proof in the pudding. They've seen the results. They've seen the tangible results of what they're the philosophy that then been preached to them. So to me, in a year, you're going to see us be much more consistent, because the consistency is the difference. So when I early, it's always hard to say where we should be, but because it depends on the project. I think when you have coaches like Conte and Jose, which the goal was to win now, then you can be much more demanding, much more earlier. It also puts other demands on the recruitment and the ownership and stuff like that. But when your stated goal is to start from the root and build something sustainable, you have to be more patient. But the value and the gift that you get in the end is much more sustainable long term. So I'd say in a year we should be definite finalists for definite favorites for the top four. In another year we should be challenging. That doesn't mean that can't happen before. Just it means that our expectations should get higher each year. To me, this year, going from 40 games to 60 games, almost 55, 60 games, if we can sustain fifth, fourth, being up there, and go further into one of these cup tournaments, that's progress. It might not look like it in the table specifically, but you have to look at more goals, more points, more consistency, better depth, all those different things that show progress. Because I think we all have work, we all have careers and lives where you see when you try something new and you're beginning, you're gonna be more inconsistent. But as you get better, you stop doing the silly mistakes. So to me, next year you're gonna see much. You're not gonna only see. You can expect more consistent progress. But I think now you should be patient.
Simon, we're sending all the patients your way. Quite literally, they are queuing up to see you. Hopefully, you're not going to let them all in on Saturday afternoon, Saturday evening. You need to get Saturday evening off. Hopefully, we've done a good result. The reason why I asked Simon that, Paul, is because, again, expectations are so different amongst some fans. I've got to say, I've never seen it quite split as what it is right now in terms of where we are on the manager. And I say that because you've got Johan Lange coming out and giving an interview to Dan Kilpatrick actually during I believe it was actually just before the international break, where he said, look, the aim is not only to win in the future, it is also to win now. A message that has been echoed by Ange Postecoglou, in which he has said, look, in his second season, he does normally win. And that's why I find it fascinating that when you ask fans, what is the target this season? What are we aiming for? Simon has said there very much that we're in a project and maybe judge him in a year's time. But we know with Ange really that he doesn't tend to last more than 2-3 seasons at a club. So I just kind of wonder, a game like this against West Ham on the horizon, how big is it in his reign when we've discussed the fact that he's yet to win in a big London derby against those 3 clubs, Arsenal, Chelsea, West Ham? Do you look at the game against West Ham and feel, is it a must-win, Paul? Is it a must-not-lose? I mean, what kind of point significance do you put on the game when you look at the season now and the fact Spurs are 9th in the Premier League? It's not anywhere we want us to be. But again, you're taking into account that it is, again, a season of transition to some degree.
Yeah, I wouldn't go that far, Ricky. I think that's a bit premature, to be honest, to be calling this a must-win game. It is a big game, obviously, and the problem, of course, is these days is that every defeat's a crisis, and every win we're going to win the league, aren't we? The reactions are more extreme these days than ever before, I think, and every defeat is almost overanalyzed because there are so many platforms now and so many places for people to have an opinion on. So, and obviously it's big business now as well. And there is no patience, is there? But as Simon said, I really think we do need to be patient. I wouldn't judge Ange until the end of this season at the earliest. Personally, I think we have to go with this. I don't think there's any point in starting again, even if we have a very indifferent rest of this season. I just think that's the problem we've had. We've always been switching different types of manager. We've not been sticking with one manager long enough. And we've got the right man, I think. And again, listening to Vince Rugari on your show the other night, he was saying he doesn't think Ange is going anywhere, isn't it? There is a history that he doesn't hang around, but he's at the top now, and I don't think he can really go any higher unless he takes over Man City. So I think this is as high as Ange is going to get. I think he will be desperate for this to be a success and won't want to leave until it is a success. And I just think there will be some bumps in the road still in the second season. But I wouldn't, even if we go on a bad run, even if we lose a couple in the next few weeks, I think we've got to keep the faith. We've got to stay patient because he, again, listening to him in that interview that you showed earlier, he just speaks so well, doesn't he? He fits in with everything that we believe in terms of his style and his attacking play. I think he's brought the club together. There's a clear strategy in recruitment. So, a long-winded way in answer to your question is I don't think it's a must-win. I think it is a huge game, and it's a game that he really could do with winning after what happened in that second half in Brighton. But I don't think the judgment comes for a long time yet, and certainly not until the end of the season, personally.
Okay, well, listen, West Ham currently sitting in 12 with 8 points. As we know, I think there are a couple of points difference off Spurs at the moment. So in terms of that, it's a game where you would arguably say it's big on that horizon. Some will bring you back in there if we can.
I just want to add something to your question, because I think your question is really interesting and on point about him saying that our goal is to win now. I think Ange is more important as a leader for us in our club where we are right now than he is as a coach almost. Because when he says stuff like that, our goal is to win now, I always win in the second seat. That's him putting pressure and also instilling a winning mentality in the club and into this team, saying, this is what our goal should be always. We should always try to win. I think that's a little bit different than what's realistic looking at our project long term. So in his brief, it's to get where he wants to come, where he wants to go, he needs to also instill a way of thinking. And I think our club, which we always complain about, has this top four mentality, and I think that's his way of trying to combat that. And Lage, repeating that talking point and that narrative is just him. It's just the club talking as one voice. This is our goal. It's not about everything we do. Is not only about winning later. It's about winning now. It doesn't mean that that's super realistic or we should expect it. So I think it's important to kind of be nuanced in how we contextualize what we're trying to do. So in that sense, that's also why I think he's here for the long term, because I think his leadership is, even if he's just here for 3 years and we don't win anything, we're going to leave being in a much better place than we were when we started out. So I just wanted to address that, because I hear that stuff a lot. But he says we're going to win now. Yes, he should say that. We should aim for that. Doesn't mean that it's something we should expect.
I mean, I do think we're going to have a good season. I think winning this season is realistic. I think winning Europa League's realistic. I think winning the League Cup is realistic, as long as we don't put Fraser Forster in goal next in 2 weeks' time against Man City. But so I do think it's realistic. But I think we should also be prepared for a few bumps in the road, as we've said, and maybe
it's the difference between realistic and expect. Maybe you shouldn't expect it, but it's absolutely realistic, and that's why he says it.
No, I think we're heading in the right direction, and we're in a much better place than we were when he came in, certainly. And we're still really in the early part of this project, I think.
I also just to quickly add into that, I think with some people, obviously, and naturally, the fans. Us as fans, we're allowed to be frustrated about not winning anything for 20 years and whatnot. But I think, unfortunately, what some people do when judging Ange is almost like a misdirection of anger or something. Like it almost feels like naturally the impatience has grown because of the fact that we haven't won anything for 20 years. So whether people might have issue with the ownership or whatever's happened, it then almost gets misdirected to Ange in a way where it's like, okay, we haven't won for 20 years. That means you have to win now because we haven't done so in 20 years, without actually giving him the chance to see his period out and build the team that he's trying to do, if that makes sense. I think we're almost judging Ange a little bit on what's happened previously at Spurs, which is unfair because he's had nothing to do what's happened previously at Spurs. All we can see is from the moment he's come in, so far from what we've seen, a lot of things have changed with the club and how he is trying to install this mentality. That's why I'm willing to give him more of a chance and be a little bit more patient with him, because like you said before, it's not like a win now manager that's off the back of the previous 7 years. It's a new manager coming in with new experiences, with a whole new team pretty much. So that's why I'm willing to be way more patient with him than I would have been if we decided to get another win now manager, say. So it's all, I have to kind of contextualize the whole thing and not misdirect the anger at the wrong person.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really important point there, George, you mentioned, because I think that's one of the key things that has come across definitely that, again, just to go back to that one last time, as Paul mentioned, Vince Ogari being on here in the previous episode, that, you know, I think he's been quite surprised by how fractured and scolded we are as a Spurs fan base, that the frustration, anger, like you said there, George, feels maybe misdirected to some degree, that Ange hasn't been the man here for the last 16, 17 years. That has been the reason Spurs haven't won a trophy. He's only been here for the last 14 months and has walked into a football club that lost Harry Kane on the eve of the season, had to completely rip up and put in a new playing style that he's trying to obviously work through. And again, do this with a very young squad that are learning to some degree, and there are going to be bumps in the road. I think what's really intriguing is, again, that is at what point does your judgment come? And I just feel, again, with on the horizon being a big London derby, in a record that, as we know with Spurs, to not keep going on about it, no wins in 6 against those sides. And you look at last season, this is an opportunity just to get us, I think, back on track and really feel that this is an exciting season that Paul touches upon. So, Paul, we'll start with you. Some lovely messages coming, Paul, through that they're loving your return to the show. We're going to hopefully get Paul on a bit regular during this season if we don't kill him off, that is. Paul, what are we going for prediction-wise against West Ham? What do you think?
Well, I'm going to stay positive. I do think there'll be a reaction to what happened against Brighton in the second half. I do worry that we'll concede. I think there'll be a big danger at set pieces, as we've seen from a few clubs, and we know that Vicario conceded a goal direct from a corner for Italy the other night, as we were saying earlier. But I think we'll win. I'm hoping Sonny's going to be back to fitness. Encouraging to hear from Alistair Gold this week that he, Richarlison and Odegaard could all be back in training this week. And something that we haven't touched on, I think. I do think this game will come too early for Richarlison and Odegaard, because I don't think we'll take any risks with those two. But it sounds like there's every chance Sonny will be fit. So I'm going for a win in a high-scoring game, and I think we'll win 4-2.
Paul, thank you so much. I think the only reason why I don't want to bring the injury news on here is every time I do that, we then find out on the Friday we've got 3 or 4 that have dropped. So I'm trying to keep what Simon did there and said, look over there, look somewhere else. Don't look at the Vicario incident during the week. We'll be fine. It was a foul. Don't worry.
Yeah,
Paul,
exactly. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Where, Paul, can people find you out there? People enjoying your return to the show. Where can they find you, Paul?
Oh, thank you ever so much, Ricky. I'm on Paul_Newman 66 on both Twitter and Instagram. And since I retired from the Mail, it's become a sort of hodgepodge of things. It used to be almost entirely cricket, but there's a lot more Spurs there now. And I should mention the message that Jason left in the comments right at the start of the show saying we should be on together. I would love that if that's possible. I'd love to be on with Jason McGovern. But the only danger will be we'll talk about cricket for an hour and a half. But if you don't mind us talking about a bit of cricket, please can I come on with Jason next time? But it's been a great pleasure to be on with Simon and George. A great pleasure to meet you both, and thanks very much for having me on again.
Paul, I'll make sure I'll get you on here after the thing with Jason, and I'll go off for an hour and a half, and I'll leave you to it. We'll make it happen. Paul, thank you so much. Simon, absolute pleasure having you back on the show. I can't imagine the therapist is going to give us a negative result now. So Doctor, what are we going for?
That'd be so fun.
Dr. Yemane.
No, I think, first of all, I would watch that cricket episode because I know nothing about cricket. So if you make it from the basics up, for all us international fans of the pod, I'll be there.
We'll educate you, Simon. It's a date. We'll tell you all about cricket in that episode.
That'll be my night off, by the way. That'll be my night off and Jason and Paul's night off.
All I know is I love the outfits. That's all I know. I think 3-1. Sonny, Solanke, and Van de Ven, another one. Header. 2.3 XG. 62% possession. It's going to be a dominant display of the almighty Lily Whites. I'm very, very positive. I think it's an important game, and I hope the players make us forget all about Brighton.
Simon, you're a star. Where can the therapist, where can those viewers and listeners find you? Hopefully not needing you after the show, but for future Spurs coverage, as Paul says, there'll be bumps in the road. Where can they find you, Simon?
You will find this happy clapper at Simon.sc. No, at Simon Yemane. That's my name. That's where you can call me a happy clapper and delusional and all that stuff. But that's where you find me.
Simon, we love you. Keep being you. And
I
like
love
say,
you guys.
Please keep going there, Simon, for all your therapeutic needs. Come
No,
on,
no, no.
show. I go to Simon on the Monday for even more. Simon, we can't thank you enough. We really do. I can't just say one thing before it does skip my mind. When podcasts in the future start asking for prediction of XGs and possession, I think that's when I'm definitely retired and I'm definitely out of here. Can I just say that's when it goes even beyond my capabilities? But we can't thank someone enough for not only giving us a prediction, but giving us a predicted XG in the possession. But God, that'll be when I definitely sign out of here for sure. George, I want to close with you. Always a pleasure to have you on the show. George, you don't really do negative predictions from what I can remember. So, George, what's it going to be for you against West Ham? I always think, George, whenever we get you on for a TNT game, not your fault, but I always get concerned because they've had you, TNT have had you after Newcastle a couple of times where it's been a long old walk down from St James's Park. But we are at home. We have got West Ham. Yes, it is on TNT for viewers and listeners around the world. For those that aren't able to attend the game, what are we going for, George, at the weekend?
Yeah, luckily I don't have to walk up 10 million flights of stairs this time around on a on a 12:30. So yeah, I'm going to go for XG. No, I'm good. I think as well. I agree 3-1. I think the only reason we concede is because I just feel like with all the travelling and internationals, I think the players will be a little bit leggy, so we might concede in a moment. But I do fancy us to score quite a few amount of goals and have a big reaction. And I'm really hoping Sonny's going to be back in the team and starting again because it'd just be nice to have his addition and maybe not put all the pressure on Johnson, considering he's now potentially going to go 8 for 8. Is it now? Will it be if he scores? So
be 8 and 8. Yep.
But I fancy him scoring again. He's going to keep going. Since that guy on Twitter said he was going to score the next 10 in a row, and he's currently on 7, I fancy him scoring in the next 3 games. So there's no way around it. But again, always a pleasure to be on here and obviously meeting Paul and Simon. Love our interactions on Twitter and stuff. So yeah, great to talk about Spurs and hopefully we get to be happy after Saturday and actually enjoy our weekends.
Oh, man, yeah. It's, as we know, at 12:30 on a Saturday for those overseas. It could be a really great start to a weekend, or it could be over before it's even begun, such as the life of a football fan and supporting Tottenham. George, thank you so much. Ever so kind of you. Where can they find you, George, if they don't know where to find you already?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much my name. If you type George Achillea into anything, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, it's yeah. I'm doing a lot more sort of like studio shoots, which aren't as often on YouTube nowadays, but on Instagram, especially, kind of doing these like cinematic edits of going to the game. So they'll definitely be on for the West Ham match. So just keep an eye on socials for those, I guess.
Love it. Absolute cinema from George Achillea. George, thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. There you are. The big preview ahead of West Ham United to come. Positive ending. And I say we've had again some interesting debates on this show. Like I say, feel free to get involved and tell us more about how you're feeling in the comments. But I want to say a massive thank you to the wonderful Paul Newman, the brilliant Simon Yemane, and the superb George Achillea. We've been the last word on Spurs. Please keep safe, keep well, and as always, come on, you.